Spence-Garcia this Saturday on pay-per-view. You know we had to get the band back together. It's expert pick time on Morning Kombat with your boys. Yes, BC, Rafe Bugs, the band back together, the MK hard way, hardcore, hard bros, bang bros. I don't know where we are right now, but it is your boy BC, one half of your weekly Morning Kombat duo. But you know, Rafe, he's a part of the family here, representing the MK with the winter cap up there in Detroit. Is it already winter, Rafe? Is this where we're at here?
We have had some snow here in Michigan. It's full on. Yeah, I almost busted my ass on some ice yesterday.
Yeah, we've been doing winter from the beginning. Yeah. Thank you very much. Rafe, let's get right into it. Fox pay-per-view Saturday from Jerry World in Texas. Errol Spence Jr. is back, unbeaten IBF WBC welterweight champion, but obviously the narrative controlling this fight against Danny Garcia, your former two-division champion, is 14 months removed from the accident. What version of Spence will be there? Is that the thing that is still front and center in your mind when you look at this fight?
Absolutely. It's the biggest question we have going into this fight. And for starters, before anything else, the best thing that can happen for boxing is if Errol Spence Jr. is completely unaffected. If we have the same Errol Spence Jr. that left the ring last year after defeating Sean Porter, getting two belts, to look at me backs. I have two belts now. And with Danny Garcia coming into the ring, wearing a velvet blazer and a terrible turtleneck and challenging him to a fight. Well, the fight is here. Some things have happened in between. I really do honestly hope that, why wouldn't any boxing fan hope that Errol Spence miraculously, not, of course, it's a miracle alone that he came out of that so unscathed, but now that when he returns to the ring, he's his old self. He is as good, that top level pound for pound talent that he is. We see that again. I hope it's true.
Well, what's great about this fight is that in theory, both guys can win, and at stake for the winner, of course, is somewhat the driver's seat position in the sport's best division, 1-7, as Amir Khan would say, owning 2 of the 4 titles, having really no shortage of big name opponents for the winner, whether it be Manny Pacquiao, whether you can cross the street with Terrence Crawford, or welcome Bud into your side of the street. More on that probably in boxing's future over the next year, or anyone from Sean Porter, Keith Thurman, on and on and on. But it's weird. We love Danny Garcia. He's been underrated before and shown us what he can do. But I feel like the closer this fight has gotten, Rafe, even though Garcia plus 300 underdog, close enough. Errol Spence operating around the minus 400 favorite area. I feel like the experts, as we get closer, are doing what we did to Sean Porter's chances ahead of the Errol Spence fight last September, going, okay, he could win, but he's probably only going to win if Errol Spence has a bad night at the office. I think that's all sort of building up this foundation that suddenly Danny Swift Garcia, once again in one of his biggest fights, is hell yeah, a live underdog here.
Well, you know what? Danny Swift Garcia has a stick, but he also has some notable upsets on his record. Amir Khan, Lucas Matisse, once upon a time. And, we know one man has his back gimmicks at all times, Crazy Angel. And look, those odds reflect, I think it would be the same odds more or less if Errol Spence Jr. hadn't been through the accident last year. And Danny Garcia has never been out of a fight. His 2 losses to Sean Porter and to Keith Thurman were close fights. You could make an argument that he won both of them, although I did score both of them for the actual winners, so I wouldn't make that argument. Your scorecards, man, forget that.
Dude, he had a bit. Well, first of all, watch yourself there. Watch yourself. Yes. First of all, I think it's a much stronger argument in the Keith Thurman fight, because I think one element of that fight, which we can talk about whether it will have the factor on Saturday, is that Danny's a legitimate big puncher. Obviously, we know the no-look left hook. I feel like he disciplined Thurman, got him to change his game plan in the second half of that fight, disarmed him for a little bit, found an avenue to come in through the back door, and he damn near reached around and nearly won a split decision. So the Porter fight, I think he was a little bit more bamboozled, closer Still a close and competitive fight, but I feel like Sean controlled that, avoided power shots completely, and confused him. So, you giveth and taketh away in boxing. We can make the argument that Danny Garcia could still be undefeated, yet these eyes kind of saw him lose to Mauricio Herrera and definitely Lamont Peterson. But I feel like the experts, the journalists, the super fans are more going, yeah, we love Danny, but unless Errol's, unless he's got an issue in there, he should win. Yet I saw an email put out there by the PBC folks taking the opinion of 36 pro fighters. 20 of them thought Spence would win. 16 of them thought, no, it will be Danny's night on Saturday. So how can it be Danny's night? Well, obviously we can say, look, he's a elite counterpuncher. He's got big power at welterweight. He's got better boxing than he ever gets credit for. He's poised. He's got a great chin. He's got all of these things. But Rafe, if you're a critical eye of the DSG story, those are great attributes to compete at the super elite level. But does he have enough to win at that super elite level at 147? Because when you look back at his resume, his greatest wins did come at junior welterweight. Well, yeah. What can he do differently now? Biggest fight of his career, most at stake, pay-per-view main event, to get over that top and not just be a guy with one punch power who maybe he can catch you.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems with Danny Garcia, or one of the things that has caused him to be underrated at times in his career, because he does not jump off the screen and blow your mind in eye test fashion like some other fighters do, especially when you try and compare him to fighters like Errol Spence, Terrence Crawford, who clearly do. And like Amir Khan once did, whoops, we maybe should have put a little more weight into that Bradis Prescott loss, but still, Danny, but Danny stays within himself. He knows what he's good at. Like you mentioned all of these factors, the chin, the defense, the counterpunching, his patience. He's never going to beat himself. And I think that leaves him in very good position here to capitalize on whatever wild card factor could exist with Errol Spence having these question marks about him. I hope that Errol Spence is not affected in any way, but Errol Spence, we don't know. No one can know. One thing, Brian, that I noticed that gave me a little bit of pause. Errol Spence didn't spar again after the accident until the end of September. That's a long time. Right. That made me think, wow, this is way more serious or it made it seem more serious. And look, he could be back to normal, but there's that mental side. You don't know what it's going to be like. He feels fine today, but you get into a ring and someone starts throwing real punches at you, and it's Danny Garcia. It's not your sparring partners. Something could be different in there. And now, if that's the case, then it's Danny's night.
Sorry for the little pause there. Yes, housekeeping fluff my pillow here. I'm in LA, of course, for Thursday night's NBC Sports Ring City USA card. But all the points you make are very interesting in terms of Danny's case here. One thing I did, look closely at the pro fighters who were picking him. Some of you got the Philly connection, some of you got the whatever cultural connection. Some guys are just saying straight up, and I'd like to get your take on this, Rafe. We saw things in the Spence-Porter fight that maybe showed real vulnerability in Errol Spence for the first time. Now, look, your point on the delay in sparring, he had to get his teeth replaced. You do hear quotes from his trainer, Derek James, on the Brian Custer podcast saying when he finally did spar, it's there. The timing, the aggressiveness, all that. We have no worries whatsoever. And if anyone's worried about Errol, he did go to the Cleveland Clinic, by the way, get the full brain test. I mean, he's cleared and ready to go, Rafe. But the key question, I think, is, what have you done lately? Last September, one of the best fights of 2019, without question, split decision win over Sean Porter. I talked to Danny Garcia last week. He said Porter straight up exposed him. Sean Porter believes he forced Errol to fight his fight. Errol's response is no. My team wanted me to box. I wanted to fight and prove a point. I went out there. We fought. I won the fight. Did that fight in any way sort of open more paths to victory for Errol Spence, who we look at as a Superman, one of the pound for pound best I mean, or is that just a great night at the office for Sean? How do you gauge that in light of Danny's potential chances here?
Yeah, look, I suppose you could say that that is the most vulnerable we've ever seen Errol Spence look in a fight, in that he was pushed. The scorecards would have been close, especially if Spence hadn't gotten that late knockdown. Although the fight happened, he did knock him down and did win that fight and did deserve to win that fight. So to me, look, I thought it was the night of Sean Porter's life. I thought that was the best performance I've ever seen out of him. When he fully put together his physical style, his, you know, the boxing that he'd worked on that kind of looked ugly and not his best work at times against, say, your Dennis Ugas, or even in some of the slower rounds against Danny Garcia. He put it together in a way that it flowed, and he was able to push Spence and give him a great fight. I thought Spence rose to the moment and rose to that challenge. I didn't take that as a exposure. What was exposed in Errol Spence that he can beat Sean Porter on Sean Porter's best night? Okay.
According to Danny, it was that there's defensive lapses. It was that he can be hit. Now, look, to defend Errol Spence, he made a point not to get hit against Mikey Garcia. He wanted to prove that he can box at distance for 12 rounds and own and control that fight, and he did it. You know, maybe Porter got him. Maybe it's more Sean Porter. Maybe it's halfway. It's Errol saying, I was ready to fight Porter, and it's Porter giving him such herky-jerky variety that he was never able to get comfortable. The problem is, when apples to apples and oranges and all that, is that this ain't Berto. Danny Garcia does not have the foot speed, the same attack as Sean Porter. But he punches harder, and he's a little bit more dangerous. Here's the effective problem, though, in handicapping this fight. If you like Danny Garcia, you're inevitably falling on the puncher's chance, right? You're saying, okay, he'll keep it close on the scorecards. He's an intelligent counterpuncher. He's not going to get himself into trouble. He's not going to be reckless. But will he do enough to have a chance to win? Is it going to be another one of those where he loses a competitive decision, but he argues he should have won it, but he didn't throw enough punches? I brought that up to Sean Porter in interviewing him this week, and he said, I saw something in the Granados fight. Now, look, you can say whatever about Adrian Granados, but one thing you could say is he's tough as balls. He's pushed all these big names to the distance and loses close fights. Pushed Porter to the distance. Danny walked him down and got him out of there and showed a aggressive side of him, Rafe, that maybe we only see in fights where the opening is there, like against Brandon Rios when he just walked him down and got him out of there. But that seemed like a different Danny in there. If you're Team Garcia, if you're the great man on top of that hat, okay, if you get up earlier than anyone, cuckoo, for the morning bird call, I feel like, tell me if I'm wrong, if they don't come out offensive and look to win early rounds and look to maybe give themselves the best chance, which is a fight rather than a chess match against a longer southpaw, quicker, maybe smarter Errol Spence, they're not gonna have a chance outside of that one punch. Can Danny do that? Will Danny do that?
Look, I'll be honest, Brian. I don't think Danny can do that. I don't think that that's his style. We've seen him fight. He's been fighting at this world-class level for close to a decade now, right? 2012, 2011 is when he fought Kendall Holt. 2012 is when he beat Amir Khan. He is who we know he is, and that's a very good fighter. I would be surprised to see him come out and try a drastically different style of game plan against Errol Spence, even though I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you're saying, and that if he could apply such a strategy, it would be wise. Because yeah, Danny Garcia can be outworked. Errol Spence can indeed out-jab him, outwork him, and use his length to kind of neutralize a lot of the counter punching and win a slow fight, a slower decision. That's not what necessarily every fan wants to see in terms of an explosive matchup, but that is a path to victory for Errol Spence. That if that happens over the first half of the fight, Danny Garcia, I hope that he does step on the gas, try to force the issue a little bit. You mentioned Adrian Granados. That guy is tailor-made for a counterpuncher, a powerful counterpuncher like Danny Garcia. He's just going to walk into the fire and get his head chopped off, which is essentially what happened. The same thing. Look, Danny Garcia looked great against Brandon Rios too. Like, if you send a caveman into that lair, he's going to beat the living crap out of him. By the way, of the 30 32 fighters who called that fight, and how many of them, I'm guessing not many, watched Danny Garcia's other recent fight against a B-level fighter, your boy, Ivan Redkach, earlier this year, because you know what? They might not be saying that Danny Garcia looks like $1 million or that there's anything different about him, that now that he went, 12 rounds with Ivan Redkach, a lightweight, man. He a lightweight.
To be honest, you are only as good as your last fight, and while Redkach has reinvented himself at welterweight and he blew away a faded Devin Alexander, you can take from that what you want. Redkach hung around. He went the distance. Now, it was at Danny staying busy. Who knows? I'm sure he would have liked to have a big knockout there to make a statement. So it's interesting. Will Garcia come out more aggressive than we've ever seen him? Probably not. But he is a good body puncher, which could be a strategy to stay in the fight, slow Errol Spence down. Here's the thing, though. If you're telling me we're getting the very best of Spence, and you're telling me he would be willing to box non-excitingly from the outside and control this fight and do what he did to Mikey Garcia, then of course I'm putting all my money on Errol Spence. But in every single interview, Rafe, including the one here on Morning Combat, he said, I expect this to be a tactical fight early, but then I expect us to go to battle and I expect to win one-sidedly. He also didn't take a tune-up fight. I mean, we do have to respect the guts, the balls of Errol Spence. He didn't want to go softly. He wanted to go as soon as he possibly could after the accident in the pandemic to get himself ready and fight Danny Garcia and stay on the road that he seemed to be on to try to prove that he's the star of this era in the most glamour, glitzy division. Do you believe him that he's expecting to get into a little bit of a gunfight with Danny Garcia and he likes his skills better? And is that giving Danny Garcia more of a chance here? How do you juggle all that?
I think that Errol Spence, like any fighter, like any athlete on that level, is going to respond to the circumstances of the actual in the moment, right? If Spence is controlling the fight early and sort of works his way into it, right? He's a little more cautious, he's jabbing, but he's also seeing that, I could do a little bit more. I can step on the gas here. I'm not worried about I see those counters coming. And he feels like he's in control. Yeah, we've seen Errol Spence, to quote the great Chris Mannix during the AJ Ruiz fight, is a composed and ferocious finisher. And if he sees that opportunity, I don't think it's going to flip around on it like Andy Ruiz did to AJ.
Show me someone he finished on that's better looking than Chris Algieri.
I've never seen Errol Spence finish on anyone, but that's you, man.
Tim Bradley says Danny Garcia is tailor-made for Errol Spence. True or false?
I could see that, yes, because he's a shorter fighter. He's less of a natural welterweight or welterweight, as Keith Thurman likes to say. And there is this way, Errol Spence has one of the like an out of this world reach for welterweight. And he's already taller and naturally bigger. He's huge at 147 pounds. He has quicker feet. He moves around the ring more. You could very much see him controlling this fight from the outside. And if he's really teeing off, then moving in to try and make more of a statement, stopping Danny Garcia, I don't know if that's possible because we've never seen it happen. Of course, it's possible.
When has he been really hurt? There was that hook from Thurman in round one, right?
Yeah, that obviously backed him up.
The last two rounds against Lamont Peterson, I feel like he was gassed and wearing down.
Yeah, we've seen him fade in fights, but not look terribly hurt.
Judah put it on him late, bro.
Yeah,
okay?
And that's a southpaw. That's a point for Errol Spence there to dial in that straight left late in the fight.
Remember when I campioned Judah in Vegas and I said that loss to Danny Garcia was actually your greatest win because of the balls you showed. And he was like, yeah, drunk like I.
Yeah, look, I'm telling you, I don't know that fighter. I know how you feel about fighters, stepping up in a losing moment. And I agree with you. But when I meet them, it's not the first thing I think I should say to them and be like, hey, I love when you have a lot of heart, man, when you lost that time.
Hey, I told Morales, I went, Campeon, yes. No business, Maidana, no business. I mean, come on, bro, all right?
What about Danny Garcia had his entire mouthpiece sent into outer space by a Matisse right, which normally hurts people real bad, and basically didn't flinch.
He takes one punch better than most of the elites. Seriously, he's incredible in that. Will he make the adjustments if he gets outboxed and worked early to be busier, or is it going to be hunt and peck with one big shot? We'll have to find out. Do you believe in the no look left hook as like a out punch, as like a superpower, or is that only against the Salkas?
I think of it as not a super. It's a great punch. He clearly has great power in it. Fighters respect it, but it's not like everyone it touches just falls down. It doesn't work that way, and I wouldn't expect that to be the case with Errol Spence. And also, it's hard. They're just the way the distances and the feet line up in a orthodox versus southpaw matchup. It's a little harder to have that left hook land in the way that he likes to against right-handed fighters.
I will say Danny has been using his right hand as a finishing punch more often at welterweight. I mean, look, again, it's Brandon Rios and Granados, but the right hand was the big parts of that. So that should be interesting. Let's break it down, sort of a tail of the tape type thing. And you tell me category by category who you think has the advantage in this matchup. Maybe that'll help us learn something we don't know. Punching power.
Overall punching power, even with Danny Garcia's one shot, his no look left hook, whatever you want to call it, I still give it to Errol Spence because he just breaks people down, and every shot hurts.
To your point, I asked Sean Porter who fought them both, and said, yes, Spence the bigger puncher. He caught me with, he sent me to a knee, put a glove on the ground, whereas he took Garcia's power certainly a lot better, although it wasn't landed as clean. Speed in this hand and feet, got to go Spence, right? Or don't make sense?
Certainly speed, foot speed is Errol Spence's territory. Hand speed in terms of reflexes might be Danny Garcia, at least in terms of counterpunching. I mean, that is his bread and butter. He wants to punch with you at the same time and win that exchange, because that's what he does better than almost any other fighter.
We've all looked at Danny Garcia's lack of super elite foot speed as maybe his biggest Achilles heel in these elite matchups. Do you think that will play a part in this matchup specifically?
Absolutely. Even though, Errol Spence he's more of he moves in straight lines a lot. He's not doing any too much crazy Lomachenko pivoting and pirouetting and dancing. There's not a lot of Ukrainian ballet in Errol Spence's movement, but he at least controls distance. He goes in and out with it. Man, when Errol Spence is just the innuendo king of this podcast or YouTube or whatever you kids are calling it these days. But anyway, he's going to move more and faster than Danny Garcia, who's a pretty flat-footed fighter.
Let's talk about pure technique and boxing ability. Who do you give the edge?
I guess Errol Spence overall, because we've seen him win in different ways. We've seen him we've seen him against a guy like Mikey Garcia who thought that he had solved Errol Spence. He thought he saw something. He thought, I'm a great high IQ boxer, and I can outbox this guy who's really physical and an excellent boxer, but not as good as me. Well, he was wrong. I mean, Errol Spence came out and made a point to outbox him and use his length and show Mikey Garcia that, it's not quite what you think it is. So we've seen him win in different ways and with more tools, right? He can do it. He can do it to Mikey Garcia. He can slow down a fight and outpoint a guy, or he'll break people down and win physical fights like he did against Sean Porter. You see him beating excellent world-class fighters at their own game. We haven't seen Danny Garcia do that, even though he's like in an exchange. I think Danny Garcia is probably the better has that skill better.
Yeah, most of these going to Errol across the board. Defense, kind of a push though, right?
I would actually say, I think Danny Garcia. He's
very responsible. Very responsible, yes.
Other than the first couple rounds against Amir Khan, we've never seen anyone light up Danny Garcia. No one has really lit up Errol Spence either, but Kell Brook probably was winning a lot of those early rounds against him. I think Errol Spence, he's responsible enough, but also hasn't cared sometimes because he's bigger, stronger. He knows he's going to do more damage. He's let guys get off on again.
Can we get an editor or a producer on this show to just stop that before you might make him shoot his load, right? I mean, come
on. But I think that Danny Garcia, with his really patient style, is just a more defense-focused fighter. He's not going to let his hands go as much, and that helps him on defense, and that danger, that threat of his counter.
Man, we clown on Amir Khan, probably rightfully so in every category, but please don't ever forget at 135 and 140 specifically, the first 2 rounds, or maybe the first round, Amir Khan was the greatest first round fighter since Mike Tyson. I'm serious. The speed and sharpness on his combinations in round 1. And he typically always gave too much effort in. I mean, remember when he exploded all over Donna's body? No, Arcos had no business getting up from that body shot in round 1. That version of, like, if Khan could have been a 3-rounder, a 3-round professional, like a new version of a Butterbean, maybe, like, he could have been dominant.
That's why he was a great silver medalist in the amateurs.
That's a good point. Back to the intangibles, experience, Danny, but it's not going to make a difference, right?
Yeah, I think they both have big fight experience, but Danny, he's been fighting just a real murderer's row of opponents throughout the last 8 years.
And he's putting his cherries on his Instagram, bro. Okay.
Well, see, he did. He also had some times when he was picking a few cherries, but if you look at the overall body of work, he's been in with probably 5 or 6 really, really high level fighters. Maybe not. I don't know where we're putting Robert the Ghost Guerrero in there at that point in his career.
That's credible. And Ghost had a moment late, so that's a credible win. I'll say.
I don't know.
He wasn't the Aaron Martinez version level of washed when he was losing fights like that, right? It was right before that.
But no, I think that Danny Garcia has been in more fights at that highest level of competition. But look, Errol Spence has looked better the times that he's been at that level, when he's fought Sean Porter, when he's fought Kell Brook and really made a statement. Danny Garcia doesn't always get that kind of win.
Yeah. Get that money player. The corner one is interesting because, say what you will about Angel, he's perfect for Danny, and he has guided Danny's career incredibly well. Again, you can make an argument, does Danny throw enough punches or look urgent enough in key moments? But then again, he rallied against Thurman and made that fight really close. Yet with that said, Derek James is what is he, at worst, a top 3 coach in boxing? I mean, he's fantastic. I don't see this being an advantage for either guy, really.
That's a push for me. They're both very good trainers, especially with Angel Garcia and Danny. They know each other so well. Angel Garcia is a character, right? He says some real wild stuff. He's entertaining all the.
We used to interview him until he started saying the N-word. Then nobody's interviewing him anymore.
Say like that. He has been very quiet. You can see they've learned to just keep him away from cameras as much as possible, which is both good and bad. But they have this bond that works. It's proven. And Derek James, again, there's not really any obvious vulnerability in either corner.
All right, let's talk intangibles here. Toughness / dog. Spence has while Danny Garcia, you can't dominate him, and we'll give him credit for that. It's a combination of defense, chin, and toughness. Spence, I believe in the backbone. Like we talk about Bud Crawford, like there's a hired gunman of a backbone in there. Like he's a killer. I do have to say, I believe the same for Errol Spence. I believe that his dog might be a little bit bigger than Danny's if this turned into an absolute savage affair.
It could be. It comes down to, and I don't know if this is another category or not, but in terms of intangibles, it really is the question of, is this the same Errol Spence mentally? Previously, I didn't see any particular mental. There was nothing to point to and say, I'm not so sure if he's got that dog in him about Spence. But now people are rightfully going to question, how does being in a life-threatening car accident that, I think like something like 60, 70% of people who get into car crashes without wearing seatbelts don't survive. Errol Spence survived that.
He was ejected at what, like 90 miles an hour speed in the Ferrari, thrown across. I mean, no broken bones though, which is wild. No teeth, and I think he had like a hurt shoulder and a hurt leg. But that's wild.
There's no way to predict how that's going to play out in the ring. Hopefully, it has no effect, but it could. And I don't think no one knows. Not even Errol Spence knows. Something could click in his head at that moment when the fight is on. That he's just not the same person anymore.
I wonder if there's any connection here. And look, when we're trying to decipher whether this will be a factor, like everyone's different. We're not pro fighters. We haven't, specifically been through this exact kind of life-changing moment. But he said, Rafe, that Errol doesn't even remember being out that night at the club beforehand, doesn't remember the accident, and doesn't even remember the 3 weeks he spent in the hospital immediately after. And it wasn't like he was in a coma, like he was recovering, but his first memory is being back at home almost a month later, waking up. So on one sense, that might scare you. On another sense, does that remove him enough emotionally from the moment where this means there won't be flashbacks? I mean, look, we are totally Monday morning quarterbacking here, the psychology, but I wonder if that helps him at all.
Well, look, you and I, Brian, are both scholars of the oeuvre of Steven Seagal, and we know that in Hard to Kill, his character Mason Storm was in a coma for months.
Nice beard. Coma beard, yeah.
He grew a lush coma beard, and he was awakened by a beautiful nurse who I think he actually married for some time. But
yeah, they smashed.
When he got out of the hospital, Brian, he was fine. In fact, he was so fine, he went on a killing spree and just eliminated. He worked himself back into shape. He did some questionable running. His road work was not great, but he had hands, man. The hands were still there for Seagal. And if that's any indication, we don't have anything to worry about with Errol Spence. He's going to be just fine.
Yeah. And you can take that to the bank, Rafe Bartholomew. Okay. Okay. Yes. The blood bank. All right. By the way, Rafe Bartholomew, a distant cousin of the Dances with Wolves Bartholomew family. Your Cubanos over there. So shout out to Ledway and all your other brethren there. Rafe, I still love this fight, all things considered. Do I believe that Danny can rise to another level we have never seen yet? No. So that has to mean that what's playing more into my handicap and prediction here is that if Errol comes in not at the same 100% we've seen him in the past, but let's say he comes in at a strong ass 85, but that opens enough of a door for Danny to have a moment. He's going to obviously need to land a big punch or score a knockdown or do something that changes the tenor of the fight. He cannot be a step behind, literally and figuratively, the entire fight and just hope he lands the big one, because you're not going to do it against a completely dialed in Spence. Yet with that said, this isn't like we're hoping, Randall Bailey can land the one bomb against Steven Alexander, and no, he didn't. So that was the worst 12-round fight I ever saw at the Barclays Center on opening night there. A guy that can push Errol and can stay in there. We're going to have to see the mind, though, of Danny Garcia get to another place that we haven't seen before, because you're going to have to outthink Errol in order to give yourself a chance to outpunch him, because he's that great. He's the dude. He's the freaking dude. And that's why I love this fight. I think that's why so many experts are not counting Garcia out by any means. And, you get into hell with him. He's got certain weapons to hang in there and not be afraid. I mean, the dude, look, Danny's freaking mentally tough. Like we with all the swag champ and the mask and all that crap and the Ciangi twins and that's the last comment I'll make on them. You really can't. You can clown him at times, but you can't clown him in the ring, dude. He is everything he should be in a lot of ways in terms of just being a championship level fighter. So let's give that man a certain level of respect he deserves. Now, while you're giving him that respect or not, it's still probably going to end up 8-4 or 9-3 Spence, right? I mean, so what am I doing? Wasting time talking to a microphone here?
No, look, I if you told me that Errol Spence at 85% of what he was is going to fight Danny Garcia, I'll call that about as close to it's like a 55-45 type fight, because Danny Garcia has shown that he belongs at that level. He is a top 5 welterweight in a very, very talented packed division at the top. He is, no one has ever outclassed him, made it really, like we've said a couple times, has ever put any distance between themselves and him in the ring. So to do that, if Errol Spence does it, will be a huge statement and something that really puts people on notice that Errol Spence is exactly who he was 15 months ago or whenever, and that he is one of the very, very, very best fighters in boxing, which we already suspect, and it will be great to be reminded of that.
Oh yeah, baby. It's time to get into the expert picks. I'm fired up. I did have something I wanted to say. I'm losing my mind here. What is worse, by the way, my Trout Canelo scorecard or this bad facial hair attempt right here? I think I'm losing control of the wheel here. You know what I mean?
I think if you grow the mustache in a little more to match that lovely goatee, then maybe, I don't know, man.
It's not
grow it out full.
Yeah. All right. Expert pick time. Gun to the head. It's time. What happened Saturday night? Let's start with you, Rafe.
I think that Errol Spence, we've seen him. I know he's saying that he's going to step on the gas late. I think he's just going to fight smart. He does not need to come out here and make this fight any harder than it needs to be. Danny Garcia is a really, really excellent fighter. And he's going to go out there and use his feet, use his jab, follow it up with his left hand every once in a while, and use his natural advantages in height and length and foot speed and movement to win a cruise to a decision. Because why would he force anything beyond that if Danny Garcia doesn't step up to do anything? And we don't know if Danny does that, right? He's so patient. It might turn out to be his downfall in this fight. So yeah, I am thinking a fairly wide decision for. Ooh. Look, I could see if Errol Spence fights a conservative version of this fight, why couldn't he get like 10 rounds to 2 or something? Because he could be more active with the jab, right, more active with his feet, and just be like, look, unless you change this, unless you force me to do something different, Danny, this is not Danny's night. This is EJ's night.
It's funny. Sean Porter told me on this show that if the Garcia family goes back to the corner and they're losing rounds and they're just getting out chest moved and they don't make the decision to step on the gas and go for it, then that is essentially making the same mistake in big fights over and over again. Can you still call yourselves, a super elite fighter and a super elite trainer? I mean, Mike Oppinger, your old colleague of The Athletic, did ask Danny on their podcast, I don't even know what it's called, but they said, would a win here put you in the Hall of Fame? And Danny's like, bro, I'm already in the damn Hall of Fame. And it's like, but what Sean echoed is kind of true. If you can't make the adjustments here, if you can't at least lose with your best foot forward and maybe put yourself into danger to try to win, which is one thing Danny doesn't necessarily do, it's going to be interesting. I don't know if he can force Spence to stop throwing his best shots like he did to Thurman. I think Spence is a little bit tougher. We've had this talk before. So my prediction in the end is I do think you'll see a little bit of adjustment time for Spence. Not for basically a accident, just, not because of the accident, maybe just because of 14 months off, right? Maybe just because of not, it's been a wild year for everybody. And Danny's good enough where I think you'll see some chess for 4 or 5 rounds. They'll be trading rounds. But once Errol figures that out and starts to be able to land in that mid-range, he's great from the outside. He did it to Mikey Garcia, but I think he wants to make a statement about where he's at. Errol is smart enough to realize that coming out and winning a boring decision won't really help him at all, critically and commercially, right?
I don't know.
He wants to come out
beating Danny Garcia, however you do it, is really good for anyone's resume.
True, but you know how momentum works. You know how buzz works. I think he wants to prove something to himself that he's not going to be gun shy. So I think in the second half of that fight, you will see an Errol Spence who is going to try to back up Danny Garcia and try to make magic. I just think he's too good to avoid the counter shots. I like him to win, 8-4. I'm going to settle on it. 116-112, Errol Spence Jr. I think Danny's going to try hard. He's going to land some moments, maybe go to the body, have some success, but he won't land the no-look left hook. It's just not going to happen. Who does Errol Spence Jr. call out afterwards in the post-fight interview?
Well, we all want him to call out Terrence Crawford, right? We were like, please, I'll be on my knees praying that he calls out Bud Crawford. I don't expect it to happen. He's going to call out Manny Pacquiao because Manny is still somewhat affiliated with PBC, and he's the best risk reward offer for either Spence or Crawford. It's why Crawford, when he won his fight against Kell Brook a few weeks ago, was like, yeah, I want Manny. And Errol Spence will also be like, well, I still want Manny. Manny still has a belt. It will be the only belt. No, it won't. But it will. There's still Terrence Crawford's belt, isn't there? It will be a third belt for Errol Spence if he can get Manny in a ring. But you know what? It'll be disappointing to me because Manny ain't taking that fight. It will not happen. He could have fought Terrence Crawford years ago when Manny was still with Top Rank. He didn't because he knew better. And he's not going to do it here.
I want to counter that. I'm going to say that Manny's about the money. He is. Dude, Manny's about the money. You know he is.
Which is another reason why he doesn't need to fight Errol Spence. He could make more money fighting your boy, Conor McGregor, in a joke match, or really, he could make the same money fighting any top level. He could make the same money against Mikey Garcia.
I could be mayor, right? Smoke crack, got my job back.
Smoke crack, you got your job back.
I just think that there wasn't money from the Crawford side then. And you can even argue now with he sold like 100,000 pay-per-view buys against Amir Khan, and Bob has Shaddeth all over him. But we can't hang around here any longer. Saturday night's fight, it's going to be fun. Can't wait to check it out. That's Rafe Bugs on Twitter, Rafe Bartholomew. If you don't know this man, he's the best boxing writer in the world today. He's also
don't fall in love with a writer who no longer exists, Brian.
Who's no longer employed. Yeah, that's great. Great mixing it up with you. I wish people can go out there. It's the holiday season. Go on to Amazon or wherever you find nice books and order 2 and 2 McSorley's, My Dad and Me. I mean, you'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll love gingers by the end of it.
Look, if you love boxing, you love father-son stories, and this is one of them.
That is a great one right there. Thank you, Rafe Bugs. I am Brian Campbell. Expect some instant analysis Saturday night from your boy BC, breaking all this things down. Do a preview as well on Friday's Morning Combat Edition with Luke Thomas. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Okay, all that and then some. Tall, pale, not really all that handsome anymore, but it is your boy BC for Rafe Bugs. I got 2 words. You want to deliver it, Rafe?
Sure. Yeah. We out.